Oh, hello, welcome back. Did you miss me? I missed you a little bit, just a little bit. Okay, so for the topic today, it's a little bit depressing, but I'm gonna try and make it less depressing because we don't want any of that on this channel. But it is basically dealing with a situation, either your situation or someone you know, going through a kind of rough patch where everything just seems to be going wrong, everything's spiraling downwards, it's all just shit hitting the fan, if you know what I mean. If you don't know what I mean, just imagine a situation where you're just going about your day and then you trip and twist your ankle and then a car comes out of nowhere and like almost hits you and then you're like, oh, almost died. Life flashed before my eyes. But wait, you get back up. You're like, phew, it's fine. And then boom, out of nowhere, elephant hits you with its trunk. You're back on the floor. You're like, this day couldn't get any worse. Elephant leaves. You're like, survived it. Totally fine. Elephant comes back, steps on you. You're all, I don't know what I did to deserve this. The universe is out to get me. You get back up, realize you fell in shit. So that is what I mean by your life is spiraling downwards and it seems like everything is just going wrong. Now that we have that beautiful picture out of the way, I honestly chuckled a little bit coming up with that scenario in my head. Am I a sick human being? Maybe. Also, before we get started, I just want to mention that my channel is more so trying to help guide you to think differently, have a different perspective, change your mindset around certain situations, rather than telling you word for word what you should do, what you should say, how you should act, because at the end of the day, every situation is so different, and I can't be the one to tell you what to do, what to say, step by step, because in order for me to do that, I would have to know every single part of your situation, and likely I don't. So just keep in mind that the videos that I'm putting out are really just to challenge the way that you're thinking about a certain situation, to help guide you in the right direction with actually dealing with the situation. I've actually had a couple of you reach out to me in my DMs on Instagram telling me a specific situation whereby I can actually help you and guide you in a more specific and tailored way. So if you do have a situation where you're like, dude, I really need some help, and you seem to at least be good at pretending you know what you're doing, then go ahead and send me your situation on Instagram in private, whatever you want to do. Or if you're super open, you can leave them in the comments down below. That is all I have to say about that. Let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is the power of reminder. I had a conversation with my friend not too long ago about how our initial instinct sometimes is irrational. It's fueled by emotion. You get really stressed out or really anxious or really sad and really emotional about a certain situation as soon as it happens. But we all have that kind of little voice in our head, the voice of reason, the voice of rationale that can talk us back down. It's not like we're constantly operating on this irrational emotional sense and we don't have the part that could reason with ourselves. It's just that that first part is more habitual and it comes first before we can talk ourselves down. And why I want to mention that is that we all have that part in our head, hopefully, I think, I'm assuming here, that knows what the right reaction is and knows that every situation has a flip side and a positive side and a better way to look at it. So if we can just use the power of reminder to remind ourselves of these kinds of things when we are thinking in a place of emotion and irrational thinking, then we can actually mitigate the situation ourselves just by using the back part of your brain that may have not been present right away, but can be present in mitigating the situation now. So for example, let's say that everything seems to be going wrong, and deep down we know that the reason it seems like our lives are spiraling out of control, or the reason that your friend's life just seems to be biting the dust and everything is just going wrong, is because the preface of having something else going wrong before another thing goes wrong makes the second thing, the third thing, the fourth thing, the fifth thing seem so much worse, because you already have the negative impact from the first, the second, whatever thing that happened prior to the last thing. So if you know that your reaction to something bad that's coming up later is heavily affected by something that's happened recently in the past, then you can use the power of reminder to tell yourself that, hey, is it really that bad? Or am I feeling vulnerable and sensitive because I've had other things happen to me? Maybe this is a reaction that happened because of something external, something that had to do with my surroundings, my life. And by just reminding yourself that those kinds of things can affect how you feel, you can kind of talk yourself down and almost coax your way into thinking a little differently about your situation, even if in fact the situation hasn't really gone away and it's still a present thing. I'm not saying that bad things aren't bad. I'm just saying that the way that you react to something can be 1,000 times worse if something else was affecting your life prior. And I'm sure you can agree with that statement. So just constantly be in that mindset of, hey, I know that I've been going through this stuff, so why don't I remind myself that that's probably what is making this seem even worse than it would be if that last thing didn't happen. You get it. Another good use of the power of reminder is to focus on the positive. I almost always talk about positivity and the way that you focus your mind, but especially in this case, when things seem to be going south and bad things just keep coming up, they're a lot easier to recall and focus on because they're a lot more prominent and a lot more stressful in your life, and B, they're taking up all the space in your mind, in your life, to kind of push all the good things that have been happening aside and only focus on those bad things. So if you can use the power of reminder to focus on some things, whether they be big or small, that worked in your favor in the last day, in the last week, in the last month, then you can kind of see that as much as bad things are happening, there are also good things happening too. And you start closing that gap between the amount of bad things that you've been focusing on and the amount of good things that you've kind of forgotten. It just puts things into a better perspective because likely there are going to be 50% bad things and 50% good things. Obviously, sometimes all the bad things will come at once, all the good things will come at once. They're not always going to be equal playing fields, but it's all about what you're willing to focus on and what you can recall and bring back to mind to remind yourself that it's never 100% bad. It may not be 100% good, but there are still some things that you can be focusing on that can make you feel like all that bad is less daunting than you imagined. And then the third thing I want to talk about in this whole power of reminder section is something that I mentioned in the stress management tips for relaxation video that I will put up there if you haven't watched it yet. But I basically talked about the fact that we've all gone through bad things. We've all seen loved ones, friends, family members go through bad things, and we've all survived some tragic thing that's happened in our life. We've all come up stronger. And if you can just remind yourself that yes, it's shitty now. Yes, I'm in a deep dark hole now, but I've survived bad things before. Why wouldn't I be able to do this again? I may not be able to see the end of the tunnel now, but I know when I look back in a few days, in a few weeks, even if it's a year from now, I will have gone through this and I will be happy again. We're humans, we're resilient, we're flexible, we adapt from our situations. You will get past this. Now remind yourself that you will. Next thing I want to talk about is the power of presence. This is more so for people who are dealing with somebody around them that feels like their life is going downhill. I'm sure we've all had it where a friend or someone we know seems to be constantly drawing the short straw and just seems to have the worst luck on this planet. I know my fair share of those people. I'm sure you do too. And one day you may be that person, okay? What I mean by the power of presence is that sometimes when things just go wrong and it's just the luck of the draw, there's not a whole lot that you can say, not a whole lot of advice or tips that you can give to that person to help them get through it, because at the end of the day, they're just life things that are happening and they happen to suck. And if you're anything like me, not having things to say and not having advice to give can be really, really uncomfortable because you're just sitting there being like, oh, that sucks, bro. But what I've been learning and what I want you to know is that presence and the act of listening is just as powerful, if not more so, for people who are dealing with this kind of negativity. Imagine if you were going through something like this and you just needed to share these bad things were happening. You wanted somebody to be there for you. You turned to your best friend or your mom or your sibling and you told them all these things that were happening. I'm sure that you would agree that you're not seeking advice. You know that bad things are happening to you and you just want someone to be there for you and to listen and to maybe give you a little hug. Or if you're like me, you just kind of lean on someone and you just give them a little nuzzle. You know, not everybody likes hugs. Like, I don't wrap my arms, I just kind of lean. People that know me will know this. But don't doubt that you listening to this person and you just being there and being present in the moment to listen to what they're going through is any less effective than being proactive and giving them all this advice, because half the time it's not warranted. And for situations like this, I guarantee you that your presence and that your listening skills will be valued beyond anything that you could say. However, I do think that you as a listener can use the first tip of the power of reminder to be that kind of guide in helping that person see all the things that maybe they're not seeing because they're in a place of emotion and vulnerability and stress and sensitivity. You can remind them that time will pass and they will forget that all these bad things have happened. You can remind them that positive things have happened in their life too. You can be the one to remind them that things aren't as bad as they seem. They certainly suck, but their emotions are definitely affected by the fact that so many things are happening at once. So if that person is unable to see and unable to remind themselves that all these things are happening, you can be the one to take them there and help them see things from a different perspective, and that is just as helpful as any other bit of advice. Okay, third thing I want to talk about is being proactive versus reactive. So I just talked about the fact that bad things seem worse when other bad things have happened before that bad thing. Man, I should really get better at saying that. Knowing this, how can you be proactive versus reactive, knowing that bad things will cause a more negative reaction to things later? I'm surprised it took this long for my dog to start barking, I'm just saying. So for example, let's say that something bad has happened to you and you know that if something else comes up, you will have a breakdown or you will be extra stressed or extra sensitive to that situation, how can you proactively try to mitigate the amount that this current situation will affect future situations? Does that mean that you try and change your mindset and focus on the positive and start reminding yourself right away? Does that mean that you go to your happy place right away, talk to a close friend right away, try to relieve as much stress and as much anxiety as possible? While sometimes just waiting for time to heal things does work for some people, it also gives you this huge gap of time that makes you extra vulnerable to any external thing that could happen to you while you bridge point A of being stressed to point B of being not stressed. I'll also link my video on how to deal with a breakup because it has a lot of tips for how you can relax yourself, how you can get back into the groove of things and reset yourself to feel a lot more happy and a lot more positive. And I urge you to try and be proactive in resolving whatever issues come up as they come up. I don't mean that if something bad happens to you, you need to try and make it better and like do all this stuff. Sometimes the only thing that's in your control is the way that you react to it and the way that you feel about that situation. There are some things that are going to happen that you definitely cannot control. But what I mean by being proactive is how can you reset yourself and your mind and your emotions so that you can power through the rest of your life at a neutral and happy standpoint. That is all I have on that topic. I really hope that it gave a little bit of guidance when dealing with things like that because I know it can be stressful, not only for the person going through it, but the people around them. If you are someone that's going through stuff like that, please do reach out to people that you love. Remember, if they were going through those kinds of things, you would want them to come to you. Anyways, like this video, comment down below, and subscribe if you wanna, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Bye!